Iran and Turkey join forces to oppose Kurdish secession in Iraq. The yes vote is strongly opposed in Ankara and Tehran. But beyond an economic embargo, what more can be done? And is military intervention an option? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Elizabeth Puranam. Iran and Turkey may seem like unlikely partners following events of the past few years, especially in Syria. But they are saying the same thing about the recent yes vote in the Kurdish referendum. Neither want Kurdish people living in northern Iraq to secede. Turkey's president visited Tehran on Wednesday. Recep Tayyip Erdogan met with Iran's supreme leader and president to discuss ways to curb the Kurds' dream of their own homeland. Turkey is threatening to stop buying oil from the Kurdish Regional Government in Iraq, while Iran has mobilised troops on its border with the region. Well, Iran and Turkey have said they stand behind Iraq's national government. Here's what Erdogan said at a press conference on Wednesday.
Ve bu referandumu da kesinlikle gayrimeşru.
We correspond with the Iraqi central government. As far as we're concerned, this referendum is illegitimate. We have already taken certain steps, but from this moment onwards, more decisive steps will be taken.
Well, that was after his meeting with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani. There had been a similar one between Turkish and Iranian military leaders in Tehran on Monday. It was the first visit to Iran by a top Turkish commander since 1979. Rouhani said afterwards, the armed forces of Iran and Turkey can develop constructive relations in addressing regional threats through development of cooperation and transfer of experiences in various sectors. Iranian and Turkish leaders are both concerned the push for Kurdish independence in Iraq could motivate similar movements within their own borders. Most Iraqi Kurds who voted to secede live here in northern Iraq. Across the border in Iran, Kurds make up about 10% of the population, and Turkey's Kurds live mainly in the southeast. Their independence movement has been active for decades. The Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, is a Kurdish rebel group which has fought for autonomy from Turkey since the 1980s. Well, now let's bring in our guest. Joining us in Erbil, Judit, Neurink, journalist and founder of the Independent Media Centre in Kurdistan. In Istanbul, Ceren Kenar, a Turkey-based political analyst, and also in Erbil, Dilawar Ala Al-Din, former minister in the Kurdistan Regional Government. Welcome to you all. Ms. Kenar, let me start with you. The first visit by a Turkish military chief of staff to Tehran since 1979. Just how worried is Turkey right now about the Kurds and what's happening in the region?
Yeah, I mean, Turkey perceives the referendum as a security threat. But I don't think that any Turkish military intervention into the Iraqi Kurdistan is likely. The main reason why Turkey perceives this referendum as a security threat is mainly due to its own Kurdish problem. As you all know, that Turkey has been struggling against a Kurdish insurgency for more than 3 decades. Therefore, this referendum, the Turkish government thinks that this referendum can hamper that insurgency and any possible peace settlement regarding that insurgency in Turkey.
Ms. Kenar, it's interesting that you don't think that
keeping Iraq's territorial.
Interesting that you don't think that Turkey will resort to any kind of military intervention here, because they have dealt militarily with the Kurds in their own country.
That's true, but it's in their own country. So, yes, the Turkish parliament had an extraordinary session to grant a motion to the government for that kind of a military intervention. So the government has the means, the legal means for that intervention, but I don't think it's likely to happen.
Ms. Neurink, Turkey has intervened in Iraq at times against the Kurds. We know that Iran doesn't have the same problems with the Kurds in their country that Turkey does. Nevertheless, we heard from President Hassan Rouhani today that they will not let the territorial integrity of Syria or Iraq be compromised. What is Iran willing to do right now, do you think, about this issue?
Well, up to now, the sanctions seem to be very mild. Iran stopped the flights of Iranian airplanes to Erbil and Suleimania, the two airports here in Iraqi Kurdistan, and they stopped the flow of petrol by stopping the tankers that go across the border. But those are the two main sanctions, really.
Mr. Ala Al-Din, how worried is the Kurdish Regional Government about the steps that have been taken by Turkey and Iran so far?
Well, of course, there are a lot of reactions that much of what we see were expected, but they do cause inconveniences. They are causing worries. People are worried about escalation into military action, although this is increasingly unlikely given the statements made and given the complexity of the dynamics on the ground. But that doesn't stop these countries to gradually, incrementally impose sanctions that will go into economy, into politics and diplomacy and international connections. And the Kurdish government and the political parties do not wish to see that, because at the end of the day they have been engaging all sides to reassure them, to say that their independence will not affect these neighboring countries and is actually going to be based on good neighborly relations even with Baghdad. But of course, we all know that these countries have their own reasons to react in the way they did. And the matter for now, or the near term, is that how much the Kurds can engage all sides into negotiation, into confidence building, and into getting them to accept certain compromises. On the other hand, the Kurds are making it clear that they do not want to declare independence now. They do not want to translate this result of the referendum into a process that is leading to independence anytime soon. They are more than happy to negotiate ways of managing this crisis and gradually reaching terms that are agreeable by all sides. But of course, not everything is dependent on how the Kurds are thinking. Much will depend on the dynamics, regional, international, and bilateral relations between these countries.
Ms. Kenar, just how much of Turkey seeking better cooperation with Iran right now on this issue do you think has to do with their ally America's support for the Kurds elsewhere in the region, namely in Syria?
This is a very good question, actually. Turkey and Iran agree to disagree on many regional issues, but this is one area that they seem to agree on. They seem to agree on keeping the territorial integrity of Syria. So both parties are wary of the possibility of a formation of a Kurdish state in North Syria. And they are also very much committed to the national integrity of Iraq. So in that sense, when it comes to the Kurdish issue, Turkey and Iran are on the same page right now. However, that being said, Iran's relations with PKK, for example, is also complicated. It's no secret that Iran had connections with PKK's commanders, and there had been regular meetings between Iranian intelligence officers and PKK high commanders in Suleimania. And in the past, Iran used PKK as a leverage against Turkey. But today, as Erdogan is visiting Iran, it seems that both countries share a common perspective when it comes to the territorial integrity in both Syria and Iraq.
And Ms. Neurink,
but that doesn't mean that these countries will keep on.
Ms. Neurink, if I can bring you in here now, if they can be on the same page about the Kurds, what about the issue of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, which they've been on opposing sides of? You know, have the military successes of the Kurds in Syria, which have greatly worried Turkey and with crucial support from the US, have they pushed Turkey to re-evaluate their priorities in Syria, where pushing back against Kurdish gains, you know, is more important now than regime change, which they have been very silent on recently?
I think there is an issue to address before that, which is the one that inside Iraqi Kurdistan, business is divided between the Iranians and the Turks. So in this case, it's very difficult to have them on one line, because in Iraqi Kurdistan, one goes with the main party KDP and Barzani, and the other one goes with the smaller parties in Suleimania, which is PUK and the Change Movement, for instance. Now, that's also a reason why people out here don't really see all these sanctions really taking hold. What we see here at the moment is mainly sanctions from Iran going through Iraq, because Iran has a big influence on Baghdad, and that means that airports are closed for international traffic, that there is a monetary problem because dollars won't be sent to Kurdish banks. The Turkish sanctions at the moment are hardly anything. The borders are open. So it is, to us, a big question, what will really come out of this meeting for this region here, for the Kurdistan region. It might even be dangerous. At the moment that the pressure becomes too big, and here we get back to the PKK and the PYD in Syria, it's very well possible that the Kurds unite. And in that case, Turkey will have Barzani on the side of PKK, and he doesn't want that. So it's very difficult what the gentlemen are doing at this moment in Tehran.
Ms. Kenar, let me bring you back in here. If we stay with Syria, do you think Iran would be able to convince Turkey, to support Assad in exchange for their cooperation on the Kurdish issue?
Well, I don't think that Iran can convince Turkey to support Assad, but I think it's safe to say that Turkey's priority in Syria has shifted long time ago. More than a year, Turkey's main priority in Syria is not to topple Bashar al-Assad. Turkey's main priority is to prevent the expansion of ISIS and PYD, PKK on its border. So in that sense, Turkey and Iran, as well as the Syrian regime, can have a common ground to prevent the Kurdish expansion along the Turkish border. Of course, Turkey has never vocally said that its priority in Syria has shifted, and I don't expect the Turkish government to recognize the Assad government anytime soon. However, the de facto situation is Turkey has already shifted its priority, its security understanding in Syria, and more focused on the Kurdish expansion on its border rather than a regime change.
Mr. Ala Al-Din, is Turkey fighting a losing battle in regards to what Ms. Kenar is saying? Because the Kurds already have a lot of territory now in northern Syria. What is the Kurdish end goal in that region, and have they all but achieved it?
Well, first of all, back to your earlier point, the reason why I personally am not so worried about the Iran-Turkish meeting is because it's not that the Kurdish question is unifying them. They inherently, because of the tough dynamics in the region and their own policies, they will find it very difficult to sustain any agreement, agree on an overall strategy in the region, and then keep to it, because they don't trust each other's motives. They are at war through proxies in Syria, in Iraq. Turkey cannot relax in the front of or in face of all these paramilitaries that are Iranian-backed, and they are overwhelming Iraq and they are overwhelming Syria. And there's too much at stake for Turkey to just give in to that. To your question, Turkish policies in Iraq and in Syria have failed over the years. Their policy towards the Kurds is also not successful. On one hand, they are very clear what they do not want when it comes to Iraqi Kurds, when it comes to Syria. But actually, they don't know exactly what they want, simply because they know their policies towards KRG or PKK. They know they want to fight PKK, but they don't have an answer to the overall question of saying, what should we do to the Kurdish issue inside Turkey? how to solve the Kurdish problem, how to make invest in the citizenship and make them forever happy within the boundaries of Turkey.
Mr. Ala Al-Din,
in other words, they have not been able to come up with... but the same thing goes to Iran. Iran has failed to deal with its own Kurdish issue, and its policies in Baghdad that led to marginalization of Iraqi Kurds, Iraqi Sunnis, have been backfiring. So
which is why we've seen the
Iran
Kurds in Iraq.
Turkey
Which is why we've seen the Kurds in Iraq wanting independence. You know, you're saying that the problem with Turkey is it knows what it doesn't want. It's not sure what it does want. Does the Kurdish Regional Government know what it wants? I mean, does it want independence? Does it just want greater autonomy now? Are the Kurds in Syria going to get their own territory in the north? And what price to pay for that in a region where all of their neighbours are against it?
Okay, well, the Kurds in Iraq, they know exactly what they want, and they will want nothing short of independence, but they also know it's not now. It cannot be achieved now. The dynamics are too complex. Nobody's ready. The regional and global powers are not ready. There is ISIS to fight. There are too many issues unresolved. But the Kurdish train towards independence has already taken off. It reached many stages. At many stations, it picked up more speed, like during 1991 when the Kurds elected their own government parliament, and then in 2003 after the fall of regime when they had a federal entity with greater powers than even that the constitution allows. The next step is to get probably into a confederal arrangement or something, and then if ultimately Iraqi Kurds will become independent. But that doesn't apply necessarily on Syrian Kurds. Syrian Kurds are not demanding that, and they may never get it if they do. And that also doesn't necessarily apply to Iranian and Turkish Kurds, because they are nowhere near ready, near Iraqi Kurds' status. The Iraqi Kurds are almost there. This recent referendum maybe provoked a reaction that is overreaction from the neighboring states, but it is a matter of time. They know they will get there because Iraq has gone too weak beyond its ability to re-embrace the Kurds, to solve the Kurdish problem, to satisfy the Kurds. And actually, Iraq has gone beyond being able to satisfy Sunni Arabs,
and even if none of
Shias in
you
the south. Even Basra may one day ask for the same thing. So
and even if none of you seem to be too concerned about what Turkey and Iran might do now, Ms. Neurink, do you think that the US, let's bring in the United States now, wouldn't they be worried at all about this, these ties between Turkey and Iran over this issue?
I think the United States look at it as many of us here in the region do. This is two countries that are, as the Lao was also saying, they're fighting proxy fights. We have Turkey that wants to unite the Sunnis. We have Iran that wants to unite the Shiites. How can you be afraid that they will actually be able to do this in a way that's going to work? So, what is very important is, when will the Americans come back to help the Kurds? Because the Kurds are really counting on that. And because of President Barzani refusing an offer that was made by the Americans and the United Nations and the Brits and a couple of other countries to help start a negotiation with Baghdad about the way towards independence, because he didn't cancel the referendum as the Americans wanted, it might take a while before these hard feelings that there are now, that before they will be solved. And yeah, I would think in the next month probably we will only see something behind the scenes. I don't think we will see anything really at the cameras. The Americans will be very careful, because at the moment they are only they're only communicating anger.
Sure. Ms. Kenar, how do you see the Americans reacting to all of this? Are they going to keep supporting the Kurds? Are they going to abandon them as they've done in the past? Would a change in US policy, do you think, towards the Syrian Kurds have a direct impact on Ankara's relationship with Tehran?
Well, it's very difficult to answer this question because the United States does not have a coherent and sustainable policy regarding Iraq and Syria for a while. So we don't actually know how the new administration will handle this issue. Of course, Barzani is an ally of the United States, and Barzani used to be an ally of Turkey as well. But the United States actually doesn't want to be in the position to be the country who invades in Iraq and divides the country. And, you know, they see this referendum as a threat to the constitution which was written by themselves. And they don't want to actually enhance figures like Maliki, like these, you know, like more hardliners in Baghdad. And they see that kind of a move as an actually step to enhance hardliners like Maliki. So in that sense, I think it's very difficult to forecast the United States reaction, how it will develop. But I think eventually the American policy will be more sympathetic to the Kurdish demands in Iraq.
Mr. Ala Al-Din, one country that seems to be sympathetic to Kurdish demands is Israel. Would Kurds accept any form of support from Israel?
Well, when you have no one supporting, somebody supporting is better than nothing. But actually, Israeli support to the Kurds at this moment means very, very little.
Yeah.
On one hand, they are in no position to physically support the Kurds. They themselves don't have much say in the world's events anymore, like it used to be. And the word Israel or the Israeli flags can only provoke Arab and Islamic countries. But what Israel can do, if they want to do it, is to lobby in Washington for the Kurds. But I don't see any sign of that either. So apart from rhetoric, I don't see really much else. But I want to come back to your question about America. The American friends are obviously disappointed because they are worried about their plans might be ruined. Their plan is to defeat ISIS and to get Abadi re-elected and peel him away from Iran. But at the same time, they know they cannot give the Kurds up. They cannot see the Kurds suffering through sanctions or military. And America and Turkey have this thing in common. They do see that Iran overwhelmed both Iraq and Syria. And if they lose the Kurds as allies, they lose everything in Iraq. And there's too much at stake for both America and Turkey to watch events and see the Kurds descending into chaos or being strangled, and then losing an important local ally who's been instrumental in fighting ISIS. So I think the Americans will not allow the situation to deteriorate enough to see the Kurds becoming ultimate victims of regional power conspiracies.
Ms. Neurink, let me just bring you in here for the final word. How do you see this playing out, the cooperation between Turkey and Iran? Just how detrimental do you think it will be to Kurdish aspirations?
I don't think it's going to be a big problem, to be quite honest, because if you look at Turkey, it's the third partner in trade is Iraq, and most of that trade goes to the Kurdistan region. If they lose that, they will have an economic crisis at home. So for the Turks, there is a no-go. And exactly as the Lawa was saying, to have more influence of Iran in Iraq and especially in the Kurdish area, that's not accepted.
All right.
So I think it will blow over.
Well, thank you to all our guests, Judit, Neurink, Ceren Kenar and Dilawar Ala Al-Din. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Elizabeth Puranam, and the whole team here, bye for now.